The driveway was full when I got there, which made no sense because my mother had called me 2 hours earlier to say that Father's Day brunch was off. My name is Caroline. I was 29 that June, and I had spent the morning arranging a gift basket for my father, his favorite bourbon, a leather-bound journal. A card I had written and rewritten 3 times because I could never figure out how to tell that man I loved him without it sounding like an apology. My mother's voice on the phone had been clipped and efficient the way it always was when she had already made a decision and was simply informing me of it. "Your father isn't feeling well," she said. "We're keeping it quiet this year. Just the 2 of us. Maybe next weekend." I told her I understood. I almost left it at that. But I had already wrapped everything, and their house was only 25 minutes from mine, so I figured I would just drop the basket on the porch, ring the doorbell, and leave. A small gesture, the kind of thing a good daughter does without thinking. But when I turned onto their street, I counted 6 cars in the driveway and along the curb. My brother, Kevin's black pickup, my sister-in-law, Rachel's white SUV, 2 cars I didn't recognize, and my sister Jenna's red coupe parked crooked near the mailbox the way she always parks, like the world will rearrange itself around her. The house was loud. I could hear music from the backyard before I even turned off the engine. I sat in my car for a full minute, holding the gift basket in my lap, staring at the front door, trying to construct some version of this that wasn't what it obviously was. I got out. I walked up the driveway slowly, past the cars, past the recycling bin already half full with beer bottles and soda cans. The side gate was open. I didn't go through it. I went to the front door instead, which was unlocked, and I stepped inside quietly because some part of me already knew that what I was about to hear would be easier to process if no one knew I was listening. The kitchen window was open, and the sounds from the backyard came through clearly, my father laughing, Kevin telling some story about a fishing trip, Rachel's voice, warm and relaxed, and then my mother, speaking to someone I couldn't see, her tone low and conspiratorial but not low enough. "Honestly," she said, "it's so much more relaxed when Caroline isn't here. She makes everything about herself. You know how she is." And then Jenna's voice, bright and agreeable. "She really does. I love her, but God, she exhausts me." I stood in my parents' kitchen holding a gift basket and listening to my family enjoy a party they had lied to keep me away from. The bourbon in the basket was a 20-year single malt. I had saved for it. I set it on the counter very carefully, as if it were something breakable, and I turned around and walked back out the front door. I made it to my car before my hands started shaking. I sat behind the wheel and pressed my palms flat against my thighs and breathed the way my therapist had taught me. Slow in through the nose, slower out through the mouth. I called my husband, Nathan. He picked up on the second ring. Nathan is a forensic accountant. He works for a firm that specializes in fraud investigation for mid-size businesses. He is the calmest person I have ever met, and when I told him what had just happened, his silence on the other end of the line was not the silence of someone who was surprised. It was the silence of someone who had been waiting for this moment. "Come home," he said. "There's something I need to show you." I should explain something. 18 months before that Father's Day, I had opened a small chain of boutique bakeries, 3 locations across the city. I had built them from nothing: the recipes, the branding, the business plan, the loans I had personally guaranteed. They were mine in the way that very few things in my life had ever been mine. When the 3rd location opened and the revenue started growing faster than I could manage alone, my mother had suggested that my father and Kevin come on board to help with operations. My father had 30 years of experience running a hardware store. Kevin had managed a restaurant in his 20s. It made sense. It felt like family pulling together. I gave them access to the business accounts, the vendor management system, and the payroll platform. I gave them keys to all 3 locations. I gave them my trust, which I now understand was the most expensive thing I have ever given anyone. Nathan had started noticing things about 2 months before that Father's Day. Small things at first. A catering supply invoice that didn't match any order I had placed. A maintenance fee for equipment we didn't own. He hadn't said anything to me initially because he wanted to be sure. Nathan does not speculate, he documents. He had spent the past 8 weeks quietly pulling records, cross-referencing vendor names with business registries, and tracking payment flows through accounts I didn't even know existed. When I got home that afternoon, he was sitting at the dining table with his laptop open and a manila folder thick with printouts. He poured me a glass of water. He told me to sit down, and then he showed me. My father had created 4 fictitious vendor accounts. The names sounded legitimate: Prestige Kitchen Supply, Meridian Commercial Services, Lakewood Equipment Leasing, Greenfield Sanitation Corp. None of them existed. The addresses led to a vacant lot in Decatur, a UPS mailbox in Marietta, and 2 locations that turned out to be my father's buddy's garage and my brother Kevin's storage unit. Over the past 14 months, invoices totaling just over $212,000 had been submitted, approved, and paid out to these phantom companies. The money had been routed through a series of transfers, first to an account in my father's name, then to a joint account he shared with my mother, and finally, in smaller amounts, to Kevin and to Jenna. Kevin had used his share to pay off the second mortgage on his house that Rachel apparently knew nothing about. Jenna had used hers to cover the debt she had been accumulating since her divorce, credit cards, a car loan she had defaulted on, and what Nathan described carefully as personal obligations to individuals who do not send formal notices. My parents had kept a portion for themselves. The amount almost exactly matched the cost of the kitchen renovation they had completed that spring, the one my mother had told me was paid for with money they had been saving for years. I sat at that table for a long time after Nathan finished. He did not rush me. He did not tell me what to feel or what to do. He simply put his hand over mine and waited. When I finally spoke, I asked him one question. "Is this enough to prosecute?" He nodded. "More than enough," he said, but he told me to wait. He told me that reacting now, while I was hurt and angry, would give them the chance to destroy records, coordinate stories, and paint me as the unstable daughter who couldn't handle a family disagreement. We needed to be strategic. I had spent 5 years building those bakeries. I was not going to let them reduce me to a cautionary tale about trusting family. The next 3 weeks were the strangest of my life. I went to work every day. I smiled at my father when he came in to check the morning inventory. I laughed at Kevin's jokes during our weekly operations call. I had Sunday dinner at my parents' house and complimented my mother's new kitchen countertops, the ones I had unknowingly paid for. I ate her pot roast and drank her sweet tea, and told her the bakeries were doing great, just great. Nathan said later that watching me during that period was like watching someone defuse a bomb while smiling. I told him it wasn't courage, it was arithmetic. Every day I waited was a day they added more evidence to the file. Nathan's colleague, a woman named Diane who specializes in forensic document analysis, helped us build the case. She verified the fictitious vendor addresses. She obtained copies of the account statements through legal channels. She mapped every dollar from its origin in my bakery accounts to its final destination. When the file was complete, it was nearly 3 inches thick and organized with the kind of precision that makes defense attorneys go quiet. Then my mother called. She wanted to discuss something important. She used the phrase family financial planning, which in retrospect was almost poetic in its audacity. She said that my father had identified an opportunity, a commercial real estate investment that could benefit all of us. She suggested we meet for lunch to talk about it. She said the initial buy-in was $80,000. I did the math in my head. $80,000 was almost exactly the remaining balance on Jenna's outstanding debts. I agreed to lunch. I suggested a restaurant downtown, somewhere nice, the kind of place where people speak softly and the tables are spaced far apart. My father and Kevin came too. All 3 of them arrived together, dressed more carefully than usual, wearing the coordinated expressions of people who have rehearsed a pitch. My father ordered a steak he didn't eat. Kevin kept checking his phone. My mother did most of the talking. She described the investment opportunity in terms that were deliberately vague: growth potential, diversified assets, a once-in-a-generation chance. When she finished, she slid a folded piece of paper across the table with a number written on it. $80,000. I looked at the number. I looked at my mother. I asked her, very simply, to explain the invoice from Prestige Kitchen Supply dated March 15th. I watched her face change. I asked my father about the Meridian Commercial Services account. I asked Kevin about the storage unit on Briarwood Road. The table went very quiet. My father's fork was frozen halfway to his mouth. Kevin's phone slipped out of his hand and hit the plate. My mother's smile didn't disappear all at once. It dissolved, layer by layer, like paint and turpentine. My father tried first. He said it was a misunderstanding. He said the vendors were real, that there had been a bookkeeping error, that the accountant had mixed up the records. When I told him I had copies of the registration documents showing that Prestige Kitchen Supply had been filed under his own social security number, he stopped talking. My mother tried next. She said I was being ungrateful. She said that after everything they had done for me, the least I could do was trust them. She said I had always been difficult, always suspicious, always looking for reasons to pull away from the family. Kevin said nothing. He stared at his plate. I picked up my bag and left $20 on the table and walked out. That evening I called my mother. I kept my voice soft. I told her I had overreacted. I told her I had been stressed from work and that I hadn't meant to make accusations. I told her I wanted to make things right. I told her about the summer showcase. I had been planning a catered event at the Whitfield Hotel downtown to celebrate the bakery's 5-year anniversary. Our investors would be there. Our wholesale partners. The food critics who had featured us in local magazines. The mayor's office had confirmed attendance. I told her I wanted the whole family there. I told her I was preparing a special recognition for my father and Kevin, honoring their contribution to the business. I told her there would be a check. Her voice transformed. The warmth returned like a faucet being turned on. "Oh, sweetheart," she said. "That's so generous of you. I always told your father you had the biggest heart." She called me sweetheart 4 more times before we hung up. The night of the showcase, the Whitfield ballroom was filled with about 150 people, white tablecloths, string quartet in the corner. A display of our signature pastries arranged in towers along the center table. My team had outdone themselves. I stood near the entrance and watched my family arrive. My father came in first, wearing a suit I had never seen before. My mother was behind him in a blue dress with her hair freshly done. Kevin and Rachel followed, Kevin's hand on Rachel's back, both of them scanning the room with the quiet greed of people estimating the value of everything they see. Jenna arrived last, alone, wearing heels she couldn't quite walk in, already holding a glass of champagne she had taken from a passing tray before she'd even said hello to me. They moved through the room like they owned it. My father shook hands with our investors and introduced himself as the operational backbone of the bakeries. My mother told the food critic from Atlanta Metro Dining that the original recipes were based on her grandmother's cookbook, which was a lie so specific it almost impressed me. Kevin was explaining our supply chain to a wholesale distributor with the confidence of a man who had spent 14 months stealing from it. Jenna was at the bar, telling someone she was thinking of opening her own location. I let them have their hour. I let them eat the food and drink the champagne and collect the compliments, and then I took the stage. I thanked everyone for coming. I talked about what it meant to build something from nothing, to take a dream and turn it into 3 locations and 47 employees and a community of people who trusted me with their mornings. I talked about the meaning of partnership and the cost of trust. I said I wanted to share something that had shaped my understanding of what family means in business. I looked at my father and smiled. I asked my family to come forward. They came up together. My mother was beaming. My father straightened his tie. Kevin looked almost emotional. Jenna raised her champagne glass. They stood beside me on that stage like a portrait of a family that works. Then I nodded to Nathan, who was standing near the AV booth in the back of the room. The screen behind me lit up. The first slide was a clean, simple summary: 4 vendor names, 4 addresses, 14 months of invoices, and a total at the bottom in red: $212,000. The second slide showed the payment routing, the account transfers, the destinations, the names on each account. The third slide showed photographs of the fictitious business addresses, the vacant lot, the UPS store, the garage, the storage unit, each one labeled, dated, and documented. The room did not gasp. That's not what happens in real life. What happens is a silence so dense it feels physical, like the air has changed pressure. 150 people holding their breath at the same time. I heard a fork clink against a plate somewhere in the back. I heard the string quartet stop mid-note. My mother put her hand to her chest and her mouth opened, but nothing came out. My father turned to face the screen and then turned back to me, and his face was the face of a man who has just realized that the ground beneath him is not solid. Kevin looked at Rachel. Rachel looked at Kevin. That look between them contained an entire marriage's worth of unasked questions. Jenna set her champagne glass down on the edge of the stage, and it fell and shattered, and she didn't look down. My father leaned into the microphone and said, "Turn that off." His voice cracked on the second word. I stepped back from the podium. Nathan had already saved copies of everything to 3 separate secure locations. There was nothing left to turn off. Jenna left first. She walked out through the kitchen, past the pastry displays and the staff who were standing very still. Kevin followed, pulling Rachel by the hand, his face the color of old paper. My parents were the last to leave. My mother tried to speak to me as she passed. She grabbed my wrist and said, "How could you do this to us?" I removed her hand gently. I said nothing. There was nothing left to say to her that a lawyer wouldn't say better. They came to my house the next morning before the sun was fully up. I watched them on the Ring camera, my father pacing on the porch, my mother ringing the doorbell over and over, Kevin sitting in his truck at the curb with the engine running. My mother's voice came through the speaker, thin and desperate. "Caroline, open this door. We need to talk about this like a family. Caroline, please." The word please sounded like it had been dragged out of her against her will. I did not open the door. Nathan's firm served them with a cease and desist that afternoon. The civil complaint for fraud, embezzlement, and breach of fiduciary duty was filed the following Monday. My father and Kevin were removed from all operational roles immediately. I changed every password, every lock, every access code. I hired a new operations manager named Grace, a woman with 15 years of restaurant management experience and no biological connection to me whatsoever, and the bakeries have been running better than ever since. Jenna called me 11 times in the first week. She left voicemails that started with anger and ended with bargaining. She said I had destroyed the family. She said I was heartless. She said Dad was having chest pains and it was my fault. She said she would pay me back. She said she was sorry. She said all of these things in varying order across 11 messages, and I did not return any of them. The legal process took 5 months. My father and Kevin were each required to make full restitution. The judge allowed a structured repayment plan, which meant they would be writing me checks for the next several years. My parents' kitchen renovation was assessed and included in the restitution amount. Kevin's second mortgage became his problem again, openly this time, and the conversations he had to have with Rachel about it were, I imagine, the kind that leave marks on a marriage. Jenna was named in the complaint as a knowing recipient of fraudulently obtained funds. She did not contest it. Her attorney advised her to cooperate, and for perhaps the first time in her life, she took someone's advice. I changed my phone number. I sent a single message to the family group chat before I left it. It said, "I wish you all well. I will not be in contact. Please respect that." My mother replied with 6 paragraphs. My father replied with 1 sentence. Kevin didn't reply at all. Jenna sent a heart emoji, which I think she meant sincerely, and which somehow made everything worse. My friend Margot came over the night after the showcase and stayed for 3 days. She didn't ask me to explain anything. She made soup. She answered my phone when relatives called with opinions. She sat next to me on the couch while I stared at the ceiling and said nothing, and she didn't try to fill the silence with comfort. She just sat there, solid and real, and I understood then that the people who matter most are not always the ones who share your blood. Sometimes they're the ones who show up with soup and don't ask you to perform your grief for their comfort. Nathan and I are good. We are better than good. He never once said I told you so, not when the evidence came together, not when my family imploded, not when I cried so hard one night that I couldn't breathe and he held me on the bathroom floor until I could. He said only one thing, and he said it the morning after the showcase while he was making coffee. He said, "You didn't lose a family, Caroline. You found out what you actually had." And then he handed me my coffee the way he always does, with too much cream and not enough sugar, and I loved him so completely in that moment that it hurt. There is a small thing I want to tell you about. Last month, I went to the first bakery I ever opened, the original location on Maple Street. I went alone, early, before the staff arrived. I stood in the kitchen where I had tested every recipe, where I had burned my first batch of croissants and cried, where I had signed the lease with hands that shook. I stood there and I looked at what I had built, and I understood, maybe for the first time, that it was mine. Not because my name was on the paperwork, but because every part of it had come from something real in me that no one could forge an invoice for. I don't hate my parents. I don't hate Kevin or Jenna. Hate requires a kind of ongoing investment that I am no longer willing to make. What I feel is something quieter and more permanent. It's the understanding that some people will love you exactly as long as you are useful to them, and that the moment your usefulness threatens to come with conditions, they will find a way to celebrate without you. If you have ever been the person that your family takes from not just money, but time, energy, forgiveness, silence, I want to ask you something. What would it take for you to stop giving? Not out of cruelty, not out of revenge, but out of the simple, radical recognition that you deserve to keep what you build. I'm still learning the answer to that question, but I'm learning it in a kitchen that smells like butter and sugar, in a business that belongs to me, beside a man who loves me without conditions, and I think that's a good place to start.